Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, episode 846 with my guest today, Sensei Kyle Doan. Kyle's here. We're going to talk in just a moment. There he is, waving for those of you watching. But if you're new to the show, or maybe you haven't been around for a while, or you just benefit from repetition, we are Whistlekick. Our whole mission is to connect, educate, and entertain the traditional martial artists of the world. And you can see everything that we do at whistlekick.com. You can grab something in the store with the code podcast15, save 15% on a shirt or training program or anything like that. Check out all the cool stuff that we've got rolling. If you want to go deeper on the show, Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio.com is the place to go. All the stuff that Kyle and I talk about today, you're going to find show notes over there for that, links, his social media. I'm looking at a stack of photos he sent over, some actually really cool shots. And and anything else that we come up with in there during our conversation, we'll make sure we link it from there. But I appreciate everyone's continued support, and special shout out to those who support our Patreon, patreon.com/whistlekick. That's where the true family lie. And if you're a family, you want to go check out all the things that you can get in on starting at $2 a month with our Patreon. But for now, Kyle, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. This is my first podcast experience, and I'm super pumped.
Nice. You know, I don't think you were quite in that first crop of people that I connected with when I joined TikTok a few years ago, but you weren't far after. Like, you and I have been trading comments for a long time.
Yeah.
Years.
I started TikTok in December 2022 or January 2023. So
okay, all right. So
not too long.
Actually, not that long ago. I guess
no.
You and I have talked enough that it feels like it's been long.
Yeah.
That's kind of
how
you want it to be, right? And you seem to be really passionate, similar to myself, about thinking about and talking about martial arts.
Oh, for sure.
Where did that come from? Is that the way you were raised in your training?
Yeah. So I started at a very young age. I was introduced to the martial arts at the age of 6. And the organization I've grown up with, the Matsukaze Budokai, or Pinewind Martial Arts, they're a heavily traditional and practical based style. And they've always taken not only the physical aspect of martial arts, but the spiritual aspect as well. I grew up on Budo and the way of the warrior, and that's defined me as a martial artist, which has really led me down that path of applying it to everything I do in my life.
Okay. So you started at 6. I'm guessing there was some parental influence there. Did you not have your parents train, or they just said, this kid's driving us nuts, let's get rid of him first?
So I dabbled in a few different sports and never really connected with anything. I did baseball, I did soccer. I grew up in a hockey family and never got into hockey. I was never interested in it.
Where do you live?
I live in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada.
Okay. I see. I didn't know you were Canadian, but the moment you said hockey, I went, wait a second.
Do I not have a Canadian accent?
There are only a few hotbeds of hockey that I'm aware of in the U.S. I'm kind of in one of them in Vermont because we might as well be part of Canada. And so, okay. All right. So now that I know you're Canadian, it completely changes everything. Please
continue. So early life, being put through different sports just because, I'm a kid and my parents want me to be active. And we had a family, we were all part of the local YMCA. And all of a sudden there was a karate program available, and my parents were like, you want to do karate? And 6-year-old me was probably like, Ninja Turtles are cool, Power Rangers are sweet, let's do it. And I did it, and apparently I excelled at it, and I have never stopped. So,
Hmm, awesome. And when you say excelled, right? And obviously, just for, not that we tend to get this sort of audience, but if anybody out there is like, oh, you're six, how? Shut up, right? Like, just that's not what he means. But what do you mean?
so th this was controversial at the time as a kid, and this is
May I ask
coming
how old?
from I'm 32.
Okay.
Um, so at the time, I remember my parents, well, more recently, I remember my dad specifically telling me about how other students and other parents of students kind of didn't like me because I tended to get more attention than others. But based on what my dad had told me, it was because I just understood things more and put in more effort. Um, and I guess, like I said, I latched onto it, and it was a huge passion for me from a young age. And by the age of 10, I was um, offered a chance to compete at the Okinawan World Championships that were held in Atlanta, Georgia. Um, and funny thing, I just recently digitized the 8 millimeter recording of it, and
Oh, cool.
I don't know if you've seen it, but I've uploaded
I
my
haven't.
performance. I did Pinon Shodan, and
We have
looking
to.
back,
We've got to get that linked in the show notes. People are going to want to see that.
yeah, I'll send it to you. Um, Looking back, I recognize what I competed against because at the time I didn't know.
Mm,
We had the intention of doing what I knew at my rank. I was a blue belt at the time. I was a fourth Q to be more specific,
mm-hmm.
um, because not every organization uses the same belt system. Um, and every kid in my age group was doing Seisan, which I look back and I'm like, that's funny because I know it now, but I didn't know it then. And my sensei regrets not teaching me a black belt kata for the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the cooler things from the recording is, and it's about an hour of video, most of it just kind of random filler. But I saw many big names in the martial arts community, like masters, Okinawan masters, on the panel that I didn't recognize at the time that I recognize now.
Oh, that's cool.
Morio Hegiona being one of them. Um, so that was a wild, you know, walk back into the past and seeing not only how I performed as a child, but I got to see that tournament again that I
Yeah.
haven't seen since I did it in 2001.
Had you competed prior to that?
Yep. So we did a lot of competitions locally um, with another group that was a little bit bigger as an organization. And I always did fairly well. Um, but once I shifted into the adult classes, I was at a younger age, but that's because I was excelling. Um, Tournament practice kind of fell by the wayside because we were focusing more on, um, well, shifting away from tournament style karate, which is more appealing to the children at the time, to more practical, um, realistic, and may I say dangerous karate.
You may. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you used the word at one point in describing your start. You used the word practical, and that's a word that is getting a lot of use with respect to martial arts, specifically karate. There is a practical karate movement. We've had a number of folks on who are headed down that path. The one that jumps to mind the most, because it was a big part of our conversation, was Samir Barado, and he's doing some work in that space, and certainly not the only one. But I assume that in using that word, you're not using it cavalier. You have meaning, you have intent
Yeah.
when you say that. So let's get a definition going first and see where that takes us.
So when I think practical karate, the first thing that comes to mind, and there was this conversation uh, through a big TikTok um, conversation, and it was the whole jutsu versus do, karate jutsu versus karate do, and we had always defined our karate as karate jutsu, which translated roughly means practical karate, applicable karate versus more spiritual karate. Um, and in my experience growing up in the martial arts, we always, uh, at least once a week, we had sparring classes, uh, applying what we learned in kata and in our other practices, body conditioning, uh, to put it bluntly, just beating each other up on a weekly basis and loving it because
Good times.
that's what we developed as karate. So that's how I think of practical, applicable.
Okay. And has your perspective on what fits that definition changed?
Not really. I will say, and I don't know if this goes off topic from this, but I will say that
There is no topic. The show is a collection of ramblings.
so I was a bit of a snob before, in being very judgmental on other ways of practice, and being introduced to a wider variety of organizations and other people studying not just karate but other forms of martial arts. I was able to open up my perspective and learn how to respect um, a wide variety of studies. I spent a lot of time in California training with a group, a Shito-ryu karate group, by the name of the Ionagi Kenshukai, or Ionagi Karate. And they were a very spiritual based karate system, all about karate do, all about bettering themselves within the art of karate. And we would go down every year to Lake Arrowhead up in the mountains for a spiritual karate camp, essentially, where there was meditation, um, there was Tai Chi, Qigong, karate, obviously, and it helped me like just be more accepting of other ways of doing it, other thought processes. Uh, and it's funny because we were always viewed as so Sensei Jeff Day was the head of the Matsukaze Budokai, and we were always considered Sensei Day's thugs because we were very rough. Um, and we would go there, and it was interesting to compare because sure, our karate was very practical, but these people were on a different level when it came to their spirituality, their being in touch with that side of the martial arts. And that's why I went, that's why it opened my eyes, right? Like they're happy. Sure, we can fight, but they're really happy people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting to me how so many people think it has to be one or the other.
For sure.
Because when we look at the way most of us look at our martial arts, if you ask people why do you train, it is rare, in my experience, it's rare that the number one reason is to protect myself.
Hmm.
That might be the reason some people get into it. And I think for some of those people, that's the justification they give, even though that's not the real reason. You know, they're looking for community and exercise and trying something new, right? Like if we were to make a list of all the benefits of martial arts, it's a pretty long list.
Yeah.
And self-defense usually drifts. And over time, it seems to drift more and more as to why, right? And some people look at that from the outside and they find massive fault in that. And that's just like, I think that's how it should be, right? That the whole.
Now I
Go ahead.
I do believe that self-defense is a foundational part of what karate is. Historically, yes. But it's the modern day. And I had this conversation fairly recently, um, discussing literally this topic. And I talked about how this isn't feudal Japan where you're worried about, your an enemy family attacking your compound or war. And this isn't the 70s and 80s where you're worried about a rival dojo challenging you and fighting you for your students. Now, I, I can't deny the fact that there are pockets of violence in this world, which is why I find karate very important and the self-defense aspect of karate to be very important because violence still exists. But as a whole, across the entire world, and you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure there's going to be people who watch this who disagree with me, but I think violence as a whole is a lot less than it's ever been in history. That doesn't
Statistically
mean it's
justify that.
less. Yeah, I don't. That doesn't mean it's less in certain areas. I know. Well, there's war happening in Ukraine. There's violence coming up from political differences and just weird, ignorant perspectives that stem from that kind of stuff. But I think as a whole, we're a little bit better off, which allows us to open up that variety in the martial arts to see a spiritual side. And even if not everyone's looking for that. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I've often said and long said that there are as many different ways of training and viewing martial arts as there are people in it. And I think that that is an asset. I think that is awesome. If there was only one way to train, then how sad would that be? Because so many
Hmm.
people would try that and it wouldn't work for them. If
Like,
you and I sat and compared notes in extreme detail, we would find differences
hmm
between, I like to do this, I don't like to do that, I'm good at this, I'm not good at that, I don't want to spend my time on this, etc. And if one of us had to be forced into that, makes us less likely to remain engaged with martial arts over time.
for sure, for sure.
I think I cut you off. I apologize if
No,
I did.
uh, I had a thought and then I lost it, so
That's
clearly it
okay.
wasn't that.
And what when people pop up and they say, well, the violence exists. Well, there are a few things. First off, I'm not aware of anybody's martial arts training that's really going to work well in a war, a modern day war. If we're talking about drone attacks and body armor and firearms, I'm going to spend my time training other things.
Yeah.
That's first off. Secondly, if you're in a place that is not at war and has significantly increased levels of violence, leave. Uh, if there are things that are that much more important to you than your own personal safety or the safety of those around you, I would, I'm not going to tell anyone how to live, but that's a very strange way of arranging priorities in my mind.
Well, and it's funny you say that because a skilled martial artist, someone who is has been heavily influenced from a quality base of martial arts, they're not going to seek that. I know lots of people. I've interacted with lots of people, especially with my time on TikTok. Growing through that social media, I've met a lot of interesting people. Um, a lot of people will take that and they love that and they seek that because they want that challenge. But what does that ultimately mean? And it may not be everybody, but the way I see it is a martial artist that's seeking fights, they're lacking something in them. They're lacking uh, confidence, and they need to prove themselves. And the same goes for, you know, going back to the TikTok thing. Um, Classic troll comments. They're lacking that, right? They have to fill that void. What are we taught? What's the biggest thing we're taught in martial arts? It's the most um, widespread understood thing about karate is we don't hit first. So take that and blow that up. Don't seek violence. Like, I know and I'm confident in who I am and what I do. Why would I want to put someone through my knowledge of martial arts? Why would I want to hurt somebody if I didn't have to?
Right. We did an episode, and I forget exactly what it was called, but the premise was there's no winning a fight.
No.
If you've gotten to that point, something has gotten lost. Doesn't mean it's
Yep.
not necessary at times, but if you constantly find yourself in violence, at some point you got to look at the common denominator, which is you.
Yeah.
Right? If you're the person who's always being wronged or treated poorly or ending up in bad relationships, or I came up with this analogy the other day. If somebody came to you and said, I just got in my 9th car accident, the first thing you're going to think, even if you've been in the car with them, you're not a very good driver. Every single person's going to think that. There's a point where you say, you're kind of defying the statistics here. So if somebody comes to me and they say, and I had a great friend who got into fights all the time when I wasn't around. He didn't train. I was like, dude, what are you doing? It was him. It was obviously him. Trouble followed him. He liked to pretend it had nothing to do with him, but I spent enough time with him in public to know, yeah, it was him.
Yeah. Sometimes you gotta be honest with yourself, and you gotta recognize that if you're following certain habits that are leading you down certain paths, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of like victim blaming, because that's a different thing entirely.
Yep.
But it's self-reflection, and I think that's a big factor and valuable thing to quality martial arts, is it allows you to do that, have self-reflection. And everyone has, everyone's run into their own problems. We're all human. We all make mistakes. But if you don't self-reflect and you don't recognize that, this is habitual, this is, possibly an addiction. Maybe they're addicted to fighting, as silly as it sounds, or the whatever rush it gives them. But it's that self-reflection, and it's about learning how to grow from that and put yourself in a better place.
There are a whole bunch of people that are training right now, and a lot of them are not training in what we would consider traditional martial arts. A lot of these folks who are at these blended gyms, MMA gyms, and the value that is placed on people within certainly not all. I don't want people to think I mean all. I don't even know if it's most, but it's enough that we're talking about a good chunk of the population that trains. It's all about fighting skill. And they've built a hierarchy that's all about fighting skill. What happens when you get older? If you have tied your self-worth to your skill in fighting, and you become old, because hopefully you want to become old, because the alternative is dying, then you look up one day and go, wow, I'm not the toughest around. And your entire worldview and personal view was built on that. That's going to be a miserable day.
Well, you'll lose your identity, right? Like,
yeah,
and like, yeah, that's pretty much it. You won't know who you are. That you're gonna lose that whole part of you. And not only that, but look at like, and I've talked about this before with like grandmasters and the high-ranking Okinawan, 70-plus-year-old black belts. They're not defined by purely their talent as a martial artist anymore. They're defined by what they gave back, and their student base, their knowledge and understanding, the history that they've been a part of. Besides like a few of them that are still terrifying. But yeah, like when you have an organization that you're a part of that's purely about fighting, well, one, are you gonna live that long? If that's all you do, how many concussions are you going to go through? Right? Like, violence is not the end all be all. And I understand that it's a part of a lot of masculine culture. And, but it's just a risk. Like,
Yeah, oh, for sure. You know, when you think about those schools that rank is based on fighting skill, my first comment to anyone who exists in one of those environments: so as skill fades, do you demote them? Well, no. Okay, so it's not the most important thing. Well, you got to pick one or the other.
yeah, that's
It's
rough.
either the most important thing or it's not. And most of the time, it's not. And the people coming up through the ranks think that that's what is being valued by the upper ranks, by the instructors, the grandmasters. But really, what it seems to be is that fighting skill tends to correlate with the other things that are of significant value within that organization. That's been my observation.
Yeah. The other problem when it comes to these pop-up gyms, MMA gyms, UFC based stuff, and it's not all of them because I don't want to, you know, brushstroke over all of them. And I've talked about this 100 times, but if a martial arts organization does not put any emphasis on self-discipline, it's just a recipe for disaster. And I've had students who have grown out of it, but who have dabbled in these environments, and it's messed them up in a way where they've come back and they were overly cocky and ignorant and just mean, violent people. And not everybody's going to be susceptible to that environment because we're all different. But young, impressionable men are drawn to this type of environment when they see the camaraderie that comes behind it. But if they're not taught proper discipline, then you're just raising a generation of violent people.
Yeah. There's an analog here that we can pull in with firearms.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the statistics on childhood firearm issues come with households where the kids were not taught what a firearm was, how to use it. You know, they grow up, they're curious, and they finally get their hands on a gun one day, but they don't know what they're doing. They don't have the respect for it. They don't have the discipline of the training, and problems can occur. But the exact opposite, you know, I live in the woods. Youth hunting is a massive thing around here. We don't have gun violence, in large part because those kids that are hunting are taught how to hunt. Right?
They're taught how to respect it.
So we could pull that same thing into the typical traditional martial arts training environment versus the I don't even know that I want to say typical because I don't roll so deep in these circles, but a at least not uncommon approach in an MMA style gym where you're given these techniques that are brutal or lethal, devastating, and training them in an environment where discipline may not be the first thing, versus the environment that I grew up in, that you likely, at least in part, grew up in. All right, we're going to do Pinyon Shodan another 5,000 times before you learn Pinyon Nidan.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in the middle of that, yeah, it's really easy to look at it and say, this sucks. I don't like it. Why do I want to be there? But look at what happens without it. If you have the skill without the temperament.
For sure. For sure. That's absolutely true. And I remember doing those classes. And I remember teaching those classes and that being a part of the development of uh, classmates and students of mine, and it makes a difference.
I grew up. I've got a couple of years on you and a couple of years of training, but not much. And the culture was likely pretty similar when you started versus when I started. I grew up at a time when instructors were expected to be responsible for their students. There was no legal standing for it,
Mm-hmm.
but if an instructor heard that a student went to a tournament and was a jerk, that instructor was expected to take action.
And I agree with that 100%.
And I do as well. And
Yep.
if that is the case, if instructors are responsible for their students, you don't pass out skills that they're not ready for. You don't give them power that they will abuse.
For sure.
And I do not see that in the at least competitive MMA world all the time. And I definitely see instances where it's the opposite,
Mm-hmm.
where a student is celebrated for going rogue and ignoring the instructions of usually in that case, it's the coach, and carving their own way and being a maverick and all of these other rebellious terms. What do you think?
Yeah. Uh, like I said, I've seen it. I To go back to that one specific MMA gym that I remember my classmate slash student being involved with, out of respect for that classmate, I came to a practice once, and I made the mistake of even remotely mentioning I had experience, and I was the target. And I found that the coach there taught out of fear or using fear, and just disrespect towards their students, this very toxic masculine environment. And it blew my mind. But what didn't surprise me was like 3 months later, the gym closed because I believe he got arrested for assault or something. Um, like no surprise there. And I've had this conversation with this student slash classmate, and they've grown us so much since then, and I'm super proud of them. But they definitely regret that experience. Now, I don't regret the skills that they learned, because at least they had some foundation of that self-discipline. And it's led them to be a very talented practitioner to this day. They're actually focusing on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now. They just received their first stripe on their blue belt, and I keep bugging them that they need to teach me. um, but yeah, it's just such an interesting thing when you can predict that, right? Like, it didn't surprise me that that gym fell through.
Yeah, I want to go back to you've used this term a couple times, and this is going to take us in a little bit of a detour from where we normally go on the show, but I want to talk about it because I think we could have a good conversation about it.
Let's do it.
The toxic masculine.
Okay.
I think everyone can understand what toxic looks like, right? And anything overly unhealthy, whether we're talking about food or personalities, training styles could even be toxic, right?
Yeah.
If you are so brutalized at the end of class that you cannot attend class the next instance, well, that's probably a toxic training environment. But this is a term that's used a lot, and it's a discussion that I see had outside of the martial arts. And given that martial arts, from my rough estimates, at least in the West, which is where I understand martial arts from anecdote, it seems to be on average somewhere between 80 and 90% male.
Mm-hmm.
Given that the population is pretty close to 50-50, we can assume that there's a reason for that. And we do have a good number of school owners that listen to this show. We do have a good number of women who listen to this show. And so I think you are the right person for me to chat about this with, because you are an insightful, thoughtful person.
Thank
And
you.
so when you use this term toxic masculinity, what do you mean?
So when I use the term toxic masculinity, I'm referring to, well, clearly between man and man, um, between men, to say it a little nicer, between men, an environment that is not supportive, an environment that uh, they're just mean to each other. And like, I've worked in environments where um, I didn't fit the expectation. I'm a smaller dude, stuff like that. Just without getting into dirty details, um, I had a weird experience with my old organization, and I had important people in my life essentially make fun of me in a very it, it was a post about men's mental health. It was a challenge, 25 push-ups for 25 days, in support of men's mental health and suicide awareness.
Mhm.
And at the time, I was struggling with my mental health. I was dealing with depression. And I thought, hey, great time to start doing push-ups, great time to start spreading awareness. It's all going to help, right? And I got some backlash, I'll say. Harmless backlash. It was just words. But my response was to stop posting because I didn't want the attention. And someone else who I'm involved with now got involved and asked why I stopped posting, and they were disappointed in my answer. And they said, so they bullied you. And I was like, hold on. They're very good people. They're old school, they have a certain type of background, and they were just razzing me. And he goes, that's great that you think that, but it still bothers me. And he called them out, and they turned on me. And after that experience, that's a big definition of me, uh, of toxic masculinity for me. And what I take from that is what I learned from this group of people. I separate that part of it, and I'm going to include love and caring and support in place of those things, on top of the rough background that made me the skilled martial artist I am today. I feel like I kind of went off topic, but
No,
that's
I know
my
where you're going.
definition. Yeah.
I know where you're going. And I think a little bit of foreshadowing, I'll spoil the punchline here. To me, it is bullying. It is the adult version of bullying, because
Mhm.
let's face it, human beings are social creatures, and part of being social involves social hierarchy. It is so deeply rooted into our genetics that we figure out where we land in the pecking order, right? That we have this stratification in everything. It's all over the place. You know, kids sports teams have captains, right? Martial arts has rank, military has rank. We like to score things. We like to know where we are, because it helps us understand what's expected of us.
Yeah.
And while that may not be as relevant today in 2023, our evolution didn't just shut off and revert to something else. We kind of have what we've had, and knowing where we fit into the pecking order used to really matter. And how did men figure that out? Well, it was often through combatives and and everything. But the
For
difference
sure.
is the place where I think that behavior becomes toxic is when it is the um, to the disadvantage of the group. I think that's the easiest way to look at it. You pulled back. You were defensive of these folks who may not have been treating you with kindness. At that point, is that toxic? Hard to say, but it became really clear when they were called out and their response instead, I assume these are older people of higher rank.
Yeah.
Instead of them taking the opportunity to understand and to educate, which is what an instructor should be doing in those environments, taking those opportunities, they decided to double down and ostracize. Now it's toxic. Now it's bullying. That's to use one's authority from a place of fear to distance themselves from something that is threatening, that isn't actually threatening.
No.
That's toxic to me.
And I will always value these people. I continue to respect them as martial artists and as people. I may not completely agree with certain aspects of
Respect
them,
can be compartmentalized. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
and I will always appreciate what they gave to me as a martial artist. But it took me a long time, and it's still something that I'm working through. This is 3 years ago, but
Because
it took
there's
a
some
long
people
time
that
for me.
you looked at highly,
Yeah,
and
it took a long time for
they
me
they
to
failed you.
accept that experience. Yeah, I was a part of that organization for 20 years plus, and let's give them the benefit of the doubt, and I was at fault in some manner. Like, did I not earn any sense of forgiveness? Like, I don't know. It was a weird experience. And what I'm appreciative of is that it's kind of allowed me to take off those rose-colored glasses. And again, I'm not bringing this up to bash them, because this organization is an incredible organization, uh, world class, and some of the best martial artists I've ever known, and will ever know. But nobody's perfect, and like I said earlier, this has allowed me to reflect on that experience and really understand where I will lead in my future and my students. And I'll take all of the good and all of the challenging, and those things that helped develop me and harden me as a quality martial artist. And I will challenge those toxic masculine traits. And not only that, but when you challenge that, that side of that, it allows things to be more available and comfortable for women, right? Like,
Yes.
you say, like we said earlier, 90% of the martial arts is male dominated. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean there aren't women practicing. And the women who I've met over the course of the years that practice are incredible martial artists. And, they deserve to have a healthy environment just as much as we do.
And just, I've brought this up on the show a number of times, but just to kind of close the thought on male versus female percentages, when I see schools that are run by women, it is much closer to 50-50.
Yep.
Which I absolutely love. And so that creates a very simple solution. If we want more women in martial arts, we need to recognize women in martial arts. We need to make sure that they are supported. We need to make sure that they can progress far enough that they can open their own schools. I mean, that is not an easy thing to do, but it is a fairly simple path. And of course, we should be doing that for everyone.
Yeah.
But you've offered up a great example of where some of the institutionalized culture in what we do can be quite unhealthy. And I would go back to connect it to something we talked about before. Where were the instructors of those instructors? When did they fall down and saying, you know what, this person's a bit of a jerk, but they've got their time in, or they did this or that, and I'm going to promote them anyway. I've been on the inside. I've seen it so many times where I've sat on a testing board and I've said, are we really promoting this person when just last week you told me that they were a insert expletive here? Why are we rewarding that behavior? Well, they'll get better. They never get better.
No.
You either need to filter them out early on, or you need to have a come to Jesus moment and say, this needs to change. I will help you. I will guide you. But part of you progressing in rank is progressing as a human being.
It's funny you say that, because this has been a very prominent topic with a good friend of mine. I think you've had some interactions with them. It's Pastor Nathan Ogden,
Yeah.
or Sensei Nathan Ogden, or Pastor Sensei Nathan Ogden. I don't know.
We need a contraction right there.
Yes.
Pensei.
He'll be watching this, so we'll see how he responds.
Pensei, or what would be the other way? Centaur?
Saster? Anyways.
I like Centaur. I'm gonna call him Centaur from now on. But
okay.
Continue.
So we've had this conversation about rank expectation, and he kind of came out of nowhere. He was watching one of my live streams, and he was like, "We need to talk." And so we connected, and we've been involved in developing a new organization, which
cool.
doesn't need to be a topic, but we can get into it if we want to. And he's been, this is going to be a topic, but he offered to promote me. And part of why because I've been hesitant to take promotion, I've had many people offer to promote me. And I've always been hesitant to take that because I want to make sure that the person I'm being promoted by is a good person. Good martial arts follows good people.
It does work both ways, folks. Taking rank from a jerk.
Well, it ruins the rank. It completely. Anyways, so he's always talked about how. I don't want to sound braggy because this is going to be about me here.
It's all good. This episode literally has your name on it. There's a braggy element to it. Just accept it and move forward.
That's fair. I'm very much. I focus highly on trying to be as humble as possible, almost to the point of it not being good for me. But anyways, so Sensei Nathan had discussed me deserving these specific ranks, not only because of my skills, because I know I'm a good martial artist, but because of my attitude and because of how I interact with people. And that's what's important. It's not just about that. And that connects back to everything else we've talked about the toxic masculinity, about, all those topics. It's all connected. It's all a big web.
It is. Okay. And so through those conversations, and talking about what warrants someone deserving of progression in rank based on the development of their character, it sounds like you two have had some conversation on that subject. What did the two of you talk about with that?
Well, lots of stuff. Just being open to conversation, being open to criticism, being patient. This relates back to TikTok, because that's been a major aspect of my growth in the martial arts recently. When I go live, I get a lot of trolls, and I have made it a mission of mine, very important part of my interaction online, is to do my best to interact with those trolls peacefully. Give them an opportunity to understand their ignorance and open them up to learning. And I've had countless people who have become followers and friends who came into my lives being rude and trolling me. And that's the best thing about that is I could have just said something mean back. And sometimes it leads to that. Sometimes a troll is there to troll and that's it. And you give them back a little bit of their energy and you let them go. But I've seen in multiple instances, and I won't name certain names, but people get too emotionally involved and it becomes a backlash for them. And that's one thing I'm proud of with my online content is I've never been at risk of losing my account because of that thought process, because I want to give everybody an opportunity to learn. And this ties back into the expectation of these ranks. Just having an open understanding of that, understanding people, how people learn, and how to communicate with every aspect of life, with every different perspective. Does that make sense?
It does.
I feel like I rambled a bit, but
no, please ramble away. Some of our best episodes have been nothing but ramble, where I if you watch it, you just kind of see me just start to go. Okay.
Whistlekick Ramble Podcast.
Ramblings, yeah. Maybe
yes.
we do a series, an infrequent series that we call Conversations. Usually somebody who's been on the show before, but maybe we should call it Ramblings. I hear you. I agree. And it was one of the things that I initially liked about your content on TikTok was that you had a very similar approach that I do, in that if somebody comes in and they're being a jerk, well, they're being a jerk for a reason, but that reason is not because they hate you, because they don't know you. It's because they are ignorant and they're having a bad day or a bad month or a bad life. And they're trying to channel some of that externally to make themselves feel better. It's not good. It's not healthy, but it's probably better than some of the alternatives that they would take if they did not have that. So if we can meet that with a bit of compassion and have conversation with them, you and I, and I don't even want us to get so close to this that people know what we're talking about, but you and I have had a conversation in private about certain subjects and people. And I have had conversations come through that were like that, where it's, there's no saving this. But I've also had others come through where it's, hey, trying to understand my perspective off a 60-second video and only watching the first 10 seconds is never going to work.
Mm-hmm.
There's a video I put up a couple days ago that people very clearly are not watching the whole thing. It's only 60 seconds, but they can't even get the whole way through because they're saying, you're saying this. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not even close to saying that. There's words that you can watch and words you can listen to, and none of them say that. But they're just looking for a punching bag. Now, if a little kid came up to you on the street and was super mad and yelling at you, you wouldn't kick them. You would recognize, whoa, this kid's having a hard time. How do I give them a hug? How do I make their life a little better? How do I make them feel heard and understood because they are acting out because they do not feel loved and supported? It doesn't matter if you're 6 or 46 or 66. It's the same thing.
Now, one thing that I thought about while you were,
Totally.
discussing that. Um, the term ignorant. I think that we need to we need to redefine ignorant, or at least in the eyes of a lot of people. There's nothing wrong with being ignorant.
Yep.
Being ignorant and sitting in it is wrong, but being ignorant is just a lack of understanding. And I've tried to make that very clear because I call people ignorant all the time because I deal with a lot of trolls.
Yeah.
And I will tell them, look, I called you ignorant. This isn't offensive. This is just an opportunity for you to open your eyes. And you may not like what I'm doing, but that's a lack of understanding. And you know what? Understand it. If you still don't like it, great. You're good. You understand it now. Because most of the hate stems from a lack of understanding. And I've been really pushing, trying to get people to understand that it's not an insult when I call you ignorant.
Yeah, that word has definitely taken a turn, and it is deemed an insult. But uh, a lack of knowledge is not necessarily anyone's fault. It is, and we all constantly operate from a place of what we understand at that time. Not everyone is willing to say, I'm going to put everything that I believe up for discussion and possible revision. But that is something that I find among the people that I connect with best, especially in the martial arts. It's that true white belt mentality, that willingness to, you know what,
Shoshin.
if I've got to throw everything out and start over, I'll do it. Because why wouldn't I? If I'm
Being
tied to ego, then I need to hold on to that stuff or that rank or that whatever. But, at the end of the day, that's not why I train. I train because I want to get better. And if there's a methodology that comes through, and I have had this happen once in my life, where I ended up with a group and within a half hour found such massive holes in what I did that I went in the bathroom and cried.
Yeah.
This was less than 10 years ago. I didn't leave. I didn't quit. I said, okay, there's a lot of opportunity here to learn. And guess what happened over the next couple years? I got a heck of a lot better.
Well, being bad at something is just the start of being good at something. Being ignorant, having a lack of education is just an opportunity to educate yourself. And without getting into that, I think that's getting demonized too. But that's a different topic.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember multiple students. So when you go through an organization over the course of 20 plus years, things change. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I have relearned, just in this example, my Pinon kata, I'm going to say 4 to 5 times. And the amount of students that I have had that hated it, that were unwilling to adjust and learn and grow, because they just didn't like the idea of changing, what they had already learned.
They liked that
But
the
like,
box was checked and they could move on.
exactly. And it's like, come on, like that's what karate is. Karate is growth. It's going to change. Like if you look at your kata 10 years ago and compare it, the same kata now, it better be different. Like if it isn't, you're doing it wrong.
For sure. For sure. Wow. What keeps you motivated? You're training, you're teaching, you're engaged in content, you're coming on here, you're talking about starting organizations. This is a huge part of your life, maybe even the biggest part of your life. I don't know how you would frame that.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
And it's been that for a very long time.
Well,
why does it remain there?
It's the community. And what my martial arts has allowed me to do to grow the community. Uh, from the beginning, money was never really an important factor, which I think, on a different note, is a problem for me because I don't want to profit off my martial arts, and it's something I'm good at, and I should. But that's besides the point.
You don't have to if you
Um,
don't want to.
well, capitalistic society, I should probably make a bit of money here and there.
You should probably eat, pay rent.
Exactly. But
I know people
my
that
main
barter
goal,
training for food.
I'd do it. Um, the ultimate goal is to spread awareness, is to give back to the community, teach martial arts to people, and allow them to have an opportunity to have the same growth I've experienced. I would not be the person I am today. I wouldn't be here because I wouldn't be a martial artist, but I wouldn't be able to speak the way I speak if it weren't for my martial arts. Uh, it's allowed me to be a confident person. It's allowed me to be good with people. And that's just one aspect of it. And that's what keeps me going. And connecting to, social medias with TikTok, specifically, has allowed me to blow that up and reach out to so many people. And the amount of times I've had comments say, I haven't done this in years, I haven't seen this in years, I'm going to start practicing again. Or thank you for, the motivation. Or like I had one recent video, and it's one of my favorite videos, from a live stream where someone asked about self-confidence, and how to fix that. And I went into some detail, and they're now a lifetime follower. And I look back on that video and I'm like, holy crap, like that's a big deal. And the advice I gave them, and that's what keeps me going. When I can see that someone has remotely stepped forward in life because of their martial arts, that's my drive.
That's awesome. Yeah. But I don't know what else to say to that. That's awesome. Some of the
mic drop.
Boom.
I have a mic here somewhere. I don't know where it went.
Some of the best emails that I get are those from people who've been, they stepped out of training for a little while, and the way they dip their toe back in is listening to the show. And some of them listen for years, literally years. I've been listening to the show for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and I finally heard you. Just do it. Just start. Just get going again. And I did. And I went to class last night, and I was terrified, and it was awesome. And thank you. And those are the emails that make me well up inside.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten a number of those over the years. And as long as that happens, I'll keep doing it.
Yeah. And I've seen both ends of it, right? Like I had a very, very dark point in my life. Essentially the end of 2021, up until the summer of 2022, I was the worst I've ever been with my mental health. And at one point I considered the idea of quitting martial arts and stepping away from it entirely. And I took a break, but you never really do. Like, it didn't take me long to realize that if I'm going to step away from karate, it's like I got to rip my skeleton out of my body, because it is me. I am my martial arts, and that experience in itself helped me define that. But like, that's what helped me realize it's in everything I do. It's how I react. It's how I interact with people. It's what helps me, at my job. I always reference it in some way, and I can't separate from it. And yeah, I want to be able to give that. I hope one day that one other person will have that same drive as me.
Awesome. If people want to follow you, find you, tell you that they hate you and you're stupid, how would they do
that? So my primary source of social media is TikTok. Kdoan3, Kdoan 3. My first initial, my last name, and the
Why
number
3?
3. I don't know. Because my name was taken, probably. I don't know. Okay. I'm actually in the process of thinking up a name for what I do, because I am no longer defined by a specific organization. Not that I want to start an organization under my martial arts. This organization I discussed earlier is more of a collaborative teaching group thought experiment.
It sounds more like an association than an organization.
Yeah, the International Neoclassical Karate and Kobudo Society.
Okay.
INKKS. Yes. Which I guess is a shout out there. But that's a whole other topic because that's still kind of in the making right now. But yeah, TikTok. Come see me on TikTok.
Once you and Centaur Ogden have that more dialed in, we'll get the two of you on the show. We can talk about it.
That'd be great. I think he'd love that.
I can't tell you how much I hope he runs with that because I think that's awesome.
I'm probably going to call him after this.
For folks in the audience who are not on TikTok and have not seen Sensei Pastor Nathan Ogden's content, he's a very kind man. We've had some back and forths on a number of subjects, and he's super kind, super chill, very thoughtful, exactly
knowledgeable.
What you would expect of a kind pastor who also trains, right? Like you probably have an image of your head of what this person is like. He is like that. And I cannot imagine he would find offense in that. I'm sure he's going to listen to this and find it funny, which is why I keep doubling down on it because it's a great visual. Right?
It's fantastic.
But yeah, we can have you guys on, and let people know what you're doing.
That would be so cool.
Yeah. And to the audience, we're gonna link all this stuff, photos and all that good stuff in the show notes. Go to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. Check out everything there. Go to whistlekick.com. Check out the stuff we've got in the store. Use the code podcast15 to save 15%. Check out our events. Check out all the things that we're doing in support of the traditional martial arts community. And so, Kyle, this is it. This is your time to bring it to a close. What words do you want to leave the audience with today?
One of my favorite quotes. Shut up and train. Kindly. I don't know. Yeah, that's been a big thing for me. Shut up and train. And I think that's a great way to end it.
Same thing?